More than 7 decades ago, in the quiet, shadowed corridors of a remote mountainside hotel in the United States, a series of late-night negotiations quietly reshaped the global financial order. These meetings, held while World War II was still burning, did more than produce policy papers. They re-engineered how nations would trade, settle debts, and store value. And from those discussions emerged the system that ultimately elevated the US dollar to the very top of the international monetary hierarchy. Today, the dollar functions as the central nervous system of global finance. According to the International Monetary Fund, roughly 58% of all foreign exchange reserves held by central banks are denominated in US dollars, far more than the euro, yen, or yuan. Its dominance is so deep that many economists describe the dollar as holding a kind of quasi-gold status in modern finance. More than 30 countries use the dollar directly as legal tender, or issue currencies that share its name. Dozens more peg their exchange rates to it, manage their currency relative to it, or rely on the dollar to price essential commodities, from oil and wheat to global shipping freight. In practical terms, this means that in global hubs like London or Singapore, and even in remote markets far from major economies, the US dollar acts as the universal reference point. And the currency that underpins today's global system traces its official birth back 234 years to April 2nd, 1792. But the story of how the dollar got its name and how a European mining town unknowingly shaped it goes back 5 full centuries. From silver valleys to the earliest dollar. The mountainous region dividing Bohemia and Saxony, in what is now the Czech Republic, was once a wild landscape of forests, wolves, and bears. Everything changed in 1516 when rich silver deposits were found near a settlement called Joachimsthal, later known as Jakimov. At that time, Europe was a patchwork of competing states and territories. Rulers asserted power through coinage, a simple physical symbol of authority. Joachimsthal's local lord followed that tradition. He minted silver coins from the newly discovered ore. These coins were called Joachimsthalers, a name gradually shortened to Thalers. Even after the mines declined by 1566, the name survived. The Holy Roman Empire later standardized dozens of local coinages, basing its imperial currency, the Reichsthaler, on the Joachimsthaler's weight and silver purity. Neighboring nations adapted the name. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden used daler. Iceland called it daler. But it was the Dutch version, closest to dollar, that would ultimately cross an ocean. When Dutch settlers arrived in North America during the 1600s, they carried the word with them. And over time, European colonists began calling all large silver coins dollars, no matter where they came from. What Americans used before the dollar. The earliest European settlers brought English coins and small gold pieces, but they didn't bring enough to sustain their colonies. Money ran out quickly. Trade with indigenous communities became difficult. As historian Jason Goodwin notes in The Almighty Dollar and the Invention of America, colonists discovered that indigenous nations valued wampum, beads carved from specific seashells. Wampum became currency for food, tools, and vital supplies. By 1637, the Massachusetts Bay Colony officially recognized wampum as legal tender. Other commodities, tobacco, corn, and furs, also acted as currency, creating an inconsistent, often chaotic system. British policy made things worse. London banned the export of gold and silver to the colonies and refused to let them mint their own coins. This forced the colonies to rely heavily on Spanish silver coins, especially the widely circulated piece of 8. Mounting taxes and monetary restrictions were key factors driving colonial anger and ultimately the American Revolution. After independence in 1783, the young nation plunged into financial crisis. Paper money issued during the war collapsed in value. A stable currency was urgently needed. In 1785, the Continental Congress met in New York and adopted the dollar as the United States currency unit. They introduced a decimal system, 100 cents to $1, but disagreements among states delayed full implementation. Real stability arrived with the Coinage Act of 1792, which created the U.S. Mint and formally established the dollar as the foundation of the nation's financial system. 7 decades later, during the Civil War, the U.S. Treasury issued its first official paper notes, printed black on the front and green on the back. These greenbacks used green ink specifically chosen to reduce counterfeiting. Where the dollar sign came from? The origins of the dollar symbol remain debated. Several theories attempt to explain it. 1. Thaler symbol theory. Some early Thaler coins featured religious symbols, crosses and serpents, whose stylized markings may have influenced currency shorthand. 2. Pillars of Hercules theory. Spanish coins used in the Americas often displayed the Pillars of Hercules wrapped in banners, a design visually similar to a vertical line flanked by curves, echoing the modern dollar sign. 3. Spanish peso theory. The most accepted merchants abbreviated the peso de ocho reales as PEs. Over time, the letters merged into a single character, evolving into the dollar sign we know today. Writer Ayn Rand later used the symbol metaphorically in her novel Atlas Shrugged, portraying it as a sign of economic freedom. But her explanation was literary, not historical. How the dollar became the world's central currency. By 1944, as World War II neared its end, most Allied economies were devastated. Factories were in ruins. Gold reserves had vanished. Nations were drowning in debt. Representatives from 44 countries gathered at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design a new global monetary framework. Europe was bankrupt. The United States, by contrast, held most of the world's gold and possessed unmatched industrial capacity. Economic historian Ed Conway, in his study of the conference, describes the negotiations as intense and often confrontational. Two figures dominated the debate: John Maynard Keynes of the United Kingdom, who proposed a neutral global currency called the Bancor to prevent any nation from dominating world trade. Harry Dexter White of the United States, who pushed for a dollar-centered system anchored by America's massive gold reserves. After weeks of arguments, diplomacy, and strategic pressure, the U.S. vision prevailed. The Bretton Woods Agreement established the U.S. dollar as the anchor of global trade, a system of fixed exchange rates linked to the dollar convertibility to gold at $35 per ounce, the creation of the International Monetary Fund, and the establishment of the World Bank. No delegate fully understood that these decisions would shape the world economy for generations. Even after 1971, when the United States ended gold convertibility, the architecture of Bretton Woods survived, and the dollar remained the planet's primary reserve currency. Its dominance is not accidental. It is the cumulative result of history, war, politics, negotiation, and the unmatched scale of the American economy. From a silver valley in Central Europe, to colonial trade routes, to the debate rooms of Bretton Woods, the story of the dollar is a story of power shaped over centuries. A currency born from miners, merchants, lawmakers, and global architects, now serving as the backbone of modern finance. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe to USMag for more clear, fact-driven explainers.